I got a call from Marcus Binney, who ran a very new organisation called Save Britain's Heritage. And he said, oh, did you know that somebody had applied, the deacons had applied to demolish Union Chapel? And you have to remember that in 1981, Victorian buildings were not regarded as important cultural objects at all. Conservation at that time had a very low profile. I made a report, basically for Save, really, which they then used to effectively persuade the Greater London Council to refuse the application to demolish. There were major structural problems caused by dry rot, but they were in different parts. For instance, the lecture hall had a huge outbreak of dry rot. This roof here, the northeast roof, was completely riddled with dry rot. But I think in terms of major structural things, the reason why the building, and I said at the time, was quite sound, was that there was no major movement in the way that would have required major rebuilding. By the time I came along, the tower was the single most problematic element in the building. It was quite clear at a certain point that the flesh, the spire, was actually pushing the walls of the tower out, and the timbers had rotted away and the flesh was about to drop down through the building. So we applied to English Heritage, as it then was, to get an emergency grant to actually rebuild the feet of the spire. That was a massive task because you had to prop up the spire as it was, take away all the bottom feet of the spire where they went into the wall, tie the whole lot together. By the time that I'd retired, it was realised that some quite dramatic work needed to be done on other bits of the tower. The pinnacles and the various decorations and so on were in a state of terminal decay, and there was great risk that things were going to drop off into the street and so on. And so at that point, Thomas Ford took over, and they came along and rebuilt the tower and the gables and so on fairly thoroughly. Until 2012, the clock was working perfectly reasonably. But a builder, we're not sure who, turned the hands round the wrong way and completely messed up and damaged the clockworks. And then when people began to look at the whole thing in more detail, it was obviously in a state of terminal decay, despite the fact that I'd been saying for some years, well, you don't really need to do any much to that. There's the whole question of the glass, because there are two sorts of glass that you can put in clocks. One is opal glass, the other is just flash glass, which has just got one side of paint or something on it and doesn't have the same sort of glow that opal glass has. And we were told that opal glass was not available, and the last was reserved for Big Ben. And I think we did eventually get opal glass. In the end, it was completely gone over, and the hands were regilded, and it was a huge success.
The chapel, unfortunately, is still on Historic England's Heritage at Risk Register. There have been many efforts in the past to stabilise it structurally, and thanks to those efforts, the church is largely very structurally stable and is able to carry on now. We have inherited a long tradition of conservation approaches at the church, and we are carrying on with the current approaches and modifying them and evolving them as we go along. So the basic approach is actually a very traditional conservation approach of conserving the building, of saving it from collapse, carrying out the repairs, and the repairs are mostly like for like. That being said, sometimes even some original details need to be considered. For example, the building itself is made of red bricks and Bath stone. Now, the original Bath stone quarries that we know of, some of them are even out of production, some of them are still being produced, but that particular stone, the original stone, deteriorates quite fast, and we see that as a recurring problem everywhere in the chapel. So there's an ongoing questioning and understanding, and we will replace bath stone, but is there a more durable bath stone that we can use instead? This is an ongoing, ever-evolving process that we're going through, and also because the building is changing and evolving, and what can we do to facilitate that change so that the building is fit for today and also for the future. We have recently just completed the conservation project for the east window. We have worked on the outside of it, and there were some very interesting discoveries that we made along that journey as well. So the window as we found it was double glazed. It had secondary glazing on the outside, opaque secondary glazing. Initially we had thought that the secondary glazing was original and was put in possibly because of soundproofing or to protect the window, which didn't make a lot of sense, because if you think there's a lot of windows around there, and this was the only one which had secondary glazing, so soundproofing wasn't the main issue. And also in terms of protection, it's actually a very protected location, so it didn't need the secondary glazing protection. So we did figure out that it was a later insertion done with the best of intentions, but actually it was causing potential damage to the stained glass. We came to the conclusion that actually we had to remove the secondary glazing, which we have done very carefully. What that has done is that a lot more light actually comes through the wheel window, and we've also done a very, very gentle clean of the glass from outside. It's made such a huge difference. It's made it very bright. The debris that was accumulating at the base, which was hiding the details, is now gone. And it is now very much, again, the focus of attention, and it's there in all its glory for us.